The 2025 NFL trade deadline is next week, so coming up on this edition of Locked On Eagles, I have some realistic trade scenarios for you and some potential blockbusters.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Welcome into this Friday edition of the show. I'm your host, Louie DiBiase, and we are brought to you by Mazda. Like the players, Mazda sweats every detail because when you make every move count, pulling off the unexpected is only the beginning. Stay tuned later for highlights in this week's Moving the Game Forward. Mazda, move and be moved. The Philadelphia Eagles are off this Sunday on a bye week at 6-2, riding the hot hand of a 2-game win streak over the Minnesota Vikings and the New York Giants. So this Sunday, we all get to sit back, relax, watch some NFL football, stress-free. Of course, we all love watching the Eagles, but I'm not going to lie. The Eagles are a stressful team to watch at times. It is nice to just watch the rest of the NFC and root for all those contenders that are pushing the Eagles for the 1 seed to lose. We'll have an NFC rooting guide later on in the show, an overall conference outlook of what to expect with this race that's pretty close for the top 2 seeds in the NFC coming down the wire. So we'll get into that later on in the show. And it is Halloween, so we've got the scariest Eagles of all time to wrap up today's episode. As you can see, I did dress up in a costume for today's show, the Fantastic Four. You guys know I'm a big Marvel fan, so I am playing the role of podcast host today, but also Reed Richards. And so we'll get into all of that later on today's episode. Make sure you subscribe for shows Monday through Friday, all podcast platforms in audio form and on YouTube as well. But before we get into all of that, the 2025 NFL trade deadline is next week. The Eagles did make their big move, in my opinion, bringing in Michael Carter Jr. from the New York Jets to be what I think is going to be your starting slot corner with Cooper DeJean now moving to the outside. But we all know Howie Roseman. He is the most active trading general manager in all of football. I think he started the trade era of the NFL back in 2016 and 2017. You look at just since August, this guy has made, 5 or 6 trades? He broke the record on draft day 2 years ago for the most trades in a 3-day draft period in the history of the NFL. So to say that Howie Roseman is done before the deadline because he made one move, I think would be naive. And I will say, he's made a lot of trades over the last few months to really, on the fly, do some good patchwork of figuring things out with some roster holes from the offseason. And so I don't think there's, now that they did trade for a corner, I don't think there's an obvious move he has to make. As I said on the episode yesterday, I don't think they even need to go out there and bring in a pass rusher. I'm pretty comfortable when Nolan Smith is back and Brandon Graham, that those two, along with Jalix Hunt and Josh Uche, and Azeez Ojulari when he's healthy, can be a solid 4 to 5 man rotation. Jahad Campbell can also continue to grow on the edge if you want him to still play some snaps there. So overall, I don't think they need to do anything even at that spot, but they could do something. They could always upgrade the roster. And so let's get into some potential blockbuster trades that could happen before next week, some realistic trades, and then I'm going to do one trade that you guys probably won't like, but just to prepare you for all scenarios, because you never know in the NFL what's going to happen. Everything is on the table, especially with this franchise, especially with this GM. We'll get into that too. So for me, before anything, before the blockbusters, the dream scenarios, the nightmare scenarios, let's get into the most realistic things that Howie Roseman could do before next week's deadline. I think the number one trade that you could expect, or that the Eagles would try to make happen, that's actually worth giving up any sort of draft capital, players in a deal, for me would be acquiring Cincinnati Bengals edge rusher Trey Hendrickson. And I would say a 3rd round pick should get it done. I want to preface that by, I want to really emphasize should, because the Cincinnati Bengals do business in a very strange way, and for some reason I feel like they would, even though they have no leverage whatsoever with him being a free agent next year, And everybody knowing the Bengals aren't going to give him a contract extension. Hendrickson's going to be gone in the open market. Yet I still think the Bengals would play hardball with you. I think it'll likely take a conditional third round pick to get Trey Hendrickson. That should be what it takes to get it done when he is healthy. That's the kind of player I still think, although I'm happy with the edge rushers that they do have, that is a clear and obvious upgrade. Like, if you can add Trey Hendrickson to a group of, and he doesn't have to be like the go-to guy, even though he is more than capable of doing that. He's had more sacks than anybody in the NFL over the last 3 years. Him and Myles Garrett, of course, and TJ Watt. Like, those have been the top three over the league the last couple years. But now you add him to a rotation of Nolan Smith and Jalix Hunt and Josh Uche, and then you have Brandon Graham and Azeez Ojulari as reserves. Suddenly, your edge rusher group looks really deep. It has a lot of star power, a lot of proven veterans, some really good, young, flashy rookies, some fastballs off the edge, and a Josh Uche. Again, I don't think they need to do anything at that spot, but if they were going to do anything there, I think Trey Hendrickson would make the most sense as like a rental, a Jay Ajayi 2017. Not even that, though, because I think they planned on Ajayi being there beyond 2017, and then injuries just caught up to him. Maybe more like a Golden Tate 2018 kind of move where it's here's a third-round pick for a player that's going to help our window right now, and we likely know we're not paying him a massive extension next year, but hey, what the hell? We have so many draft picks in 2026, 2027. We had a ton that we used in 2025. We can afford to give up a third-round pick for a rental player when in other years, normally I wouldn't like that approach, but this year I think the Eagles could afford it. So what the heck? Go get a Trey Hendrickson for the run. I think that's a realistic trade that I could see happening next week. Another one for me is for a defensive tackle that the Eagles actually almost signed this past offseason. He is a great leader, one of the best veteran leaders in a locker room in the entire NFL, still a very productive player as well on the interior. If you want to add a fourth guy, a veteran, to that trio of Jalen Carter, Moro Ijoma, and Jordan Davis. If you want to bring in in 2022, I thought it was really useful when the Eagles brought in Linval Joseph and Ndamukong Suh. Calais Campbell from the Arizona Cardinals for, let's say, a conditional fifth-round pick. That would make a lot of sense for this team, too. Calais Campbell is somebody the Eagles targeted this offseason. Of course, he was going back to a place that he started his career with the Cardinals. But Arizona is playing their way out of a playoff spot, out of playoff contention in the second half of the season. And I could see the Eagles wanting to do this, to keep Jalen Carter fresh, Moro Ijoma, and Jordan Davis as well, to add another veteran voice in that locker room. They really liked that idea of bringing in Zadarius Smith. Then he retires. They bring back Brandon Graham. Maybe you want a veteran in that interior room as well for the defensive tackles. Calais Campbell, I think, probably could be had for pennies on the dollar at this point, because Arizona, I don't know what Jonathan Gannon's feeling over there in Zona in the desert, but I think holding on to a near 40-year-old defensive tackle probably doesn't make much sense. So yeah, I think like those are the realistic trades to expect. A veteran rotational player on the defensive line, a Calais Campbell, maybe even a Cam Jordan from the New Orleans Saints. Trey Hendrickson, I think, is the best move you can make at edge rusher. That's pretty realistic. I know we've tossed the name out there 1,000 times. Bradley Chubb could make some sense from the Miami Dolphins, who, by the way, lost again on Thursday Night Football to the Baltimore Ravens, so he could be even more available at this point. Those are, to me, the most realistic trades, but I do have one other realistic trade for you on the offensive side of the ball. What could they use on offense? They're pretty complete on that side, but how about another tight end? Dallas Goedert has 7 touchdowns this year, which is tied for the most receiving touchdowns in the NFL, but we know his injury history. We know the Eagles are going with bigger offensive packages right now with an extra 6th offensive lineman. Maybe they want to bring another inline tight end in that can block but also catch as well. The Cleveland Browns are kind of out of it at this point. Not kind of, they are out of it in the AFC. Harold Fannin has emerged as a true legit star rookie tight end. What about a 4th-round pick for David Njoku, who I think is still... He's on the other side of his prime, but, getting close to 30, but under contract right now. If the Eagles want to use a 12 personnel package and And instead of using Fred Johnson out there at times, maybe put out there a guy that can block but also catch the football as well. David Njoku is somebody that I haven't really seen his name get thrown out there, but I think it makes a lot of sense with the emergence of Harold Fannin. Dallas Goedert is also a free agent next year. He's going to go to the highest bidder in the open market, and Njoku could be a potential replacement idea just for 2026, maybe not the long-term answer, but that's a move that could not only help you this year, but also in the long term. Maybe you target the Cleveland Browns, not just for the elephant in the room, and we'll talk about that guy in a second, but somebody on offense like a David Njoku. I could see them adding another tight end. I don't think they're going to add another receiver with the way Jahan Dotson plays every time they give him the ball. I've mentioned Rashid Shaheed in the past, but I don't think that's very realistic. But a tight end, I could, especially with the way they're playing more under center, play action, using a sixth offensive lineman, I could see them wanting another tight end because Grant Calcaterra has regressed, I think, significantly compared to who he was in 2024. And then let's get into the blockbuster. This one's not as realistic, but I've been seeing this name thrown out there the last few days. We've heard the Eagles are interested. Of course they are. They were interested in Micah Parsons in the offseason. Why would you not be interested in a guy that just had 5 sacks in an individual game last week? Myles Garrett for 2 first-round picks and a third-round pick. Similar value to what the Dallas Cowboys got back for Micah Parsons. Myles Garrett is the best pass rusher in all of football. The Eagles have a lot of young players in their prime on both sides of the ball. 2 late first-round picks and a third-rounder. Giving up that much draft capital normally is hard to swallow, but I think the Eagles are in a position right now where if this opportunity did present itself, and I don't think with Andrew Berry as the GM of Cleveland, and he has Eagles DNA, being a former Howie Roseman guy in the Eagles front office, I don't think he parts with Garrett after giving him a blockbuster extension just this offseason. But let's say it was on the table for Cleveland, it should absolutely be on the table for the Philadelphia Eagles. 2 first-round picks, a third-rounder for Myles Garrett. That's the dream scenario, the trade that you probably aren't expecting to see next week, but if you could say best-case scenario happens before the deadline, I think that's the move. And it is picking up a little bit of steam around the media the last few days. Maybe that's just to, get attention, clicks. It probably is. But Myles Garrett, I think, would absolutely welcome this. Maybe he should have just not signed that extension with the Browns this offseason. I don't know. I think that's probably what should have happened. All right, guys, coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast, the Eagles have a bye week this Sunday, so we're going to watch a lot of NFC football and see who the Eagles are dealing with for the 1 seed and NFC outlook coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast. Today's episode of the Locked On Eagles podcast is brought to you by Mazda. Mazda's moving the game forward for those who believe it's not just about playing the game, it's about redefining it. There are moments that do more than put points on the board. They move crowds, move culture, and keep moving the game forward. This week's moment that moved the game forward for the Eagles, I think last week, was, to me, the Jahan Dotson bomb. It was already over in that game, but that really was the dagger. That was the finishing touch on an incredible day. Jalen Hurts just chucks it up to his third receiver, 40 yards down the field, the left corner of the end zone. Dotson jumps over the corner, completely mosses him, brings in another circus catch like he always does when he wears Kelly green for the dagger touchdown to get the Eagles to 6-2. When you follow what moves you, like Dotson moved the ball into the end zone, the unexpected is only the beginning. And just like there's more to every highlight, there's more to a Mazda vehicle. Mazda, move and be moved. Guys, today's show is also sponsored by America's #1 sportsbook. It's FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets to win a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Thanks as always for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. It's a Friday edition of the show. Happy Halloween, everybody, for those who celebrate spooky season. Rocking the pretty much a Comic-Con level Fantastic Four Reed Richards costume. If you guys don't know a little bit about me, my second nerdiest hobby outside of just being an Eagles nerd is that I love Marvel, and so I went pretty hard for this year's Halloween. So, yeah, happy Halloween, everybody. Let's get into with the Eagles having a bye week during the Halloween weekend, an NFC outlook, because when you look at this conference, it's pretty good top to bottom. Like the AFC, it's had the reputation of being the stronger conference over the last couple of years, and it makes sense. Like the Kansas City Chiefs have been a dynasty that have won 3 Super Bowls. They've been to 5 at this point, right? They're 3-2 in Super Bowls with Mahomes and Andy Reid. They have all the quarterbacks, like Josh Allen, the Buffalo Bills, one of the most consistent winners in sports in Buffalo over the last 7 to 8 years. They have Lamar Jackson over there, a 2-time MVP. Joe Burrow, one of the top 4 quarterbacks in football, in my opinion, has been to a Super Bowl in the last 6 seasons. Justin Herbert as well, having a really strong year with the Chargers. Like they have all the young quarterbacks that are the new faces of the NFL, and even some of the guys they expected to be that, even if they haven't become that, like Trevor Lawrence in Jacksonville, and so on and so forth. Justin Herbert, like I said. So the AFC, because of the quarterback position, has kind of gotten the reputation of being the stronger conference. But when you look at it, the NFC has the better rosters, the better overall talent, the better Super Bowl contenders. The Chiefs do look all the way back. As long as the Buffalo Bills have Josh Allen, they're going to be a unit. They're going to be a title contender. But outside of those two teams, like the NFC has everybody else. They have the Eagles, who, in my opinion, should still be the favorite in this, and not just in the conference, but in the NFL until proven otherwise. The Detroit Lions, the Los Angeles Rams, the Green Bay Packers, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Like I just rattled off 5 teams that you could argue might be the number 1 seed in the AFC at this point. And it's not just at the top, the true title contenders, but look at teams like the San Francisco 49ers. Look at teams like the San Fran, the Seattle Seahawks, I meant, in the NFC West. Like another team that only has a couple losses this year. Sam Darnold looks like the real deal, that last year's really strong year in Minnesota is not a mirage. One of the most underrated defenses in the entire NFL. They are loaded with young talent on all 3 levels of that defense. And that's just a bunch of scrappy teams that can either score points or stop you on defense, like the Minnesota Vikings, the Dallas Cowboys, the Chicago Bears. There's not a lot of terrible teams in the NFC. Even the Commanders, when Jane Daniels is back, is still a wild card contender. The Atlanta Falcons are a very weird team, but they've got a lot of talent and beat the hell out of the Buffalo Bills a couple weeks ago. There's one really bad team in the NFC, right? It's probably the Saints, but the Saints have been competitive this year. The Panthers at one point were 4-3. The Giants with Jackson Dart have been way scrappier than maybe people imagined. The Cardinals, they might be the worst at this point. But head to toe, this conference is strong. So when you watch the NFC this week without the Eagles, I think there are some things you might come to conclusions on. For me, I think halfway through the year, I feel like I do have a good sense of what we're dealing with in this conference. I do think, number one, the playoffs, it's going to be a gauntlet. Because like I said, it's not just the top contenders you have to deal with. There are, 4 other teams that are really pushing you for the Super Bowl. LA, Detroit, Green Bay, and Tampa. But like I said, even the wild card round, you might get a draw. If you don't get the bye week, you might have to play Seattle week 1 in the wild card round. That's tough. The 49ers are a tough out. Even if you play a pesky team that squeaks in as the 7th seed, like a Vikings or a Falcons, or, Dak Prescott and Dallas always play the Eagles tough. The Commanders too. That's not easy. So I think you're definitely learning the NFC playoff bracket's going to be a lot harder to get through. It kind of feels like in the NBA, the Western Conference compared to the East, where LeBron used to back in the day just roll through the Raptors and the Bucks and the Pistons and the solid Pacers teams, but the West was always just a complete brawl between a bunch of contenders. That's the NFC in my opinion this year. I do think though, in my opinion so far halfway through the year, I truly believe the Eagles are still the team to beat in this conference. if you had to ask me who the top two contenders are, the most legitimate threats to the Eagles defending the NFC title, I still think it's the Los Angeles Rams and the Detroit Lions. I think push comes to shove. Those are the two teams that I think if the Eagles didn't make it, I would predict get to San Francisco this year for Super Bowl 60. I do think Green Bay, of all these teams at the top, they have the second highest ceiling with the Eagles at number one. But I do think with the Rams, Lions, also the Buccaneers included in this conversation, the Packers do have the lowest floor, though, of all those contenders. So those are like my conclusions of this conference. The playoffs is going to be a gauntlet. The Rams and Lions are the two teams to watch the most behind the Eagles. Green Bay has the second highest ceiling, but they have the lowest floor of all these contenders. And then I do think Tampa Bay belongs. I think they've shown that they're not just like the obvious 4 seed that wins a weak NFC South. I do think that they belong in that conversation with Philly, with LA, with Detroit, with Green Bay. I think they've proven that with the way they've won games without a lot of core pieces on both sides of the ball. They've been pretty banged up, and yet they're still at top of the NFC. So for me, like, that's what I'm watching in this conference right now. That's kind of what I feel 8 weeks through the season. It'll be really interesting to kind of watch those teams this week with a non-biased perspective and kind of just see what the Eagles are up against. But it's a really good conference, and the Eagles have their work cut out for them. They play a lot of these teams. They already played Tampa Bay this season. They play Green Bay next week. They've got Detroit still this year. They've got the Cowboys again, Washington twice. We're going to see how they stack up. They already beat the Buccaneers. That was a massive win. They already beat the Rams. So the Eagles have passed their 2 tests in this conference already outside of their own division. Beating Dallas, of course, helps too. We'll see what happens with Green Bay and Detroit as well. I really can't wait for that Detroit game because the Eagles have not played the Lions since they've both been obvious Super Bowl contenders. Last time they played was week 1 in 2022. The Lions have talked a lot. They think they're the superior team. We were about to see it in the NFC title last year in Detroit, but they could not get past the Commanders. So we'll see what happens in a couple weeks. Who is the more superior team in this conference that is absolutely loaded? But we'll definitely watch this Sunday and kind of see who emerges in this just Royal Rumble of an NFC. All right, guys, we'll wrap up the show coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast. It's Halloween, so we'll have some fun to wrap up this Friday edition of the show. Who are the 5 scariest Eagles in the history of this franchise? I'll tell you coming up right here on Locked On Eagles. Today's episode of the Locked On Eagles podcast is brought to you by Rugiet. Let's be real, making excuses never solves anything. We've all heard them before. It's just stress. I'm tired. It happens to everybody sometimes. But when it comes to performance, sometimes your body just needs a little extra support, and that's where Rugiet comes in. Rugiet.com offers fast-acting, doctor-prescribed treatment for ED, designed to help you stop making excuses and start making moves. Rugiet makes it easy to get started. You just connect with a board-certified doctor, 100% online, no awkward waiting rooms, no in-person appointments. If prescribed, your treatment ships discreetly straight to your door. The process is fast, simple, and private, and it's all handled by real doctors. It's about confidence, connection, getting back to the moments that matter. So visit Rugiet.com/LockedOnNFL to get 15% off your first order. That's Rugiet.com/LockedOnNFL. And don't forget to use our code LockedOnNFL so they know that we sent you. Rugiet, stop making excuses, start making moves. Thanks as always for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. We are wrapping up this Friday edition of the show. And make sure your second listen, by the way, make sure your first listen is us every Monday through Friday. Your second listen should absolutely be the Locked On NFL podcast. My guy, the madman, Tyler Rowland, he gets you started in the morning with a shot of football espresso. And then Tony Wiggins, the barber, brings you into the barber shop to talk some ball during the afternoons. 2 Locked On NFL episodes every single day, Monday through Friday, wherever you get your podcasts. All right, so it's Halloween. As you guys can see, I am draped in this Reed Richards cosplay suit. So with it being Halloween, I thought we would end the week with some fun. It's a bye week as well, so LOE3 is going to take a break. By the way, absolutely cooked with my 3 FanDuel bets this week. If you didn't give up on me, you won big because we absolutely cleaned up. And now we're back to a positive unit share on the season. We're actually, I think, +4 on the year, and we were at -3 heading into the week. So we're looking a lot better as the Eagles offense continues to heat up as the year goes on. Yeah, so I hit on the Devontae Smith parlay at +114, over 5.5 receptions, over 69.5 receiving yards. I had the over on Jalen Hurts' touchdowns, over 1.5. He had 4 on the day, so definitely crushed that. And Saquon Barkley is the first touchdown scorer, and that was at +410. Jalen for at least 2 touchdowns through the air was at +116. Smitty's 2-leg parlay was at +114. So suddenly I'm 10-14 on the year. I'm getting close to being back to 500, and I'm at a positive unit share. So now officially, if you've been betting with LOE3 every week, you have not lost money. So we're cooking. We've still got a lot of games to go this season, and hopefully I can end the year on a positive note like I have the past 5 seasons. Anyway, like I said, Halloween. Who are the 5 scariest Eagles of all time? And you can interpret this in a multitude of ways. Let's say you're a cornerback and you're getting to the line of scrimmage and an Eagles receiver comes up and you're like, oh crap, we got to deal with this guy. What receiver puts the fear in secondaries more than anybody? What pass rusher used to come to the defensive line in the trenches, and if you're a right guard or you're a left tackle, you're like, oh shoot, I got to go up against this guy all day. Maybe it's a quarterback because of what a dynamic playmaker he was. It was a hard-hitting safety. Who are the top 5 scariest Eagles of all time? For me, I did not have a hard time making this list. I'm very curious what you would say. Hit us up on X at LockedOnBirds, at DiBiase LOE. My number 1 guy, I think this one was very obvious. It's Weapon X. It's Brian Dawkins. It wasn't just the fact that he's the hardest hitting safety, I think, in the history of the NFL, but it was also his mentality, the way he talked, the way he looked, the black visor with that midnight green jersey, his energy, the way he came out of the tunnel crawling like the Wolverine, the way he would give those motivational, almost scary speeches, yelling at his teammates to just stick it to somebody every single play. I think Brian Dawkins, Weapon X, is by far the scariest Eagle in franchise history. He was the human manifestation of what the city of Philadelphia is. If the city of Philadelphia was a football player, it's Brian Dawkins, and that is why he's still to this day, even with all the Super Bowl champions and legends we've had over the past 8 years, he is still, to me, in my opinion, I think most of you would agree, he's the most beloved Philadelphia Eagle of all time. So he was, to me, number 1. That was easy. Reggie White, I know his nickname is the Minister of Defense, but I think he's the second scariest because Reggie White, there was a season during the lockout, or it was the union strike, right, with the NFL in the 80s, where the guy played 12 games. Only 12 games. There are 17 now in an NFL season, and he had over 20 sacks. He could win from the inside. He can win from the outside. He could beat you with a bull rush. He could beat you with a spin move, speed to power. There's a reason he's a top 3 pass rusher in the history of the NFL. And while he was the nicest guy off the field from what it seemed like, again, the Minister of Defense, a very religious guy. He was a great teammate, a leader for the Eagles and the Packers. But on the field, one of the most unguardable players, unblockable players in the history of the NFL. So to me, Dawkins and Reggie White are number 1 and number 2. Then I went on the offensive side of the ball. I went with Deshaun Jackson, number 3, because Deshaun Jackson at any point could kill you. Deshaun Jackson, it wasn't about quantity. It wasn't about volume. That guy could make you pay with just 1 touch of the football. He didn't need 9 to 10 targets to win. He needed 1 catch for 90 yards and a score because he is one of the most electric home run hitters, deep threats. I think he's the best deep threat in the history of the National Football League. So if you were a cornerback, if you were a safety, if you were a defensive coordinator trying to game plan, you had to know where number 10 was at all times. You had to make sure he did not beat you over the top, or else I mean, it's lights out. It's game over. So Deshaun Jackson, to me, is number 3. And it's not just that, like, as a punt returner, too. Look at the miracle in the New Meadowlands. Tom Coughlin is screaming at Matt Dodge, like, do not kick it to this man. He will take it to the house. And what did he do? He took it to the house. So Deshaun Jackson's number 3. Then number 4 and 5 are on the team currently. I think it's A.J. Brown and Saquon Barkley. A.J. Brown is the most complete wide receiver the Eagles have ever had, from a combination of size, speed, physicality, route running, hands. If you're building a receiver in the lab, you got Calvin Johnson coming out of there. You got Terrell Owens. You've got Randy Moss. You've got A.J. Brown. Like, he looks the part. And so does like somebody like DK Metcalf, his former teammate at Ole Miss. But Metcalf doesn't have the refined route running, the body control, the hands, in my opinion, of an A.J. Brown. A.J. Brown uses his body, like his size, his physicality, to his advantage, whereas DK, I don't think, does as much. And so to me, like, A.J. Brown is just a matchup nightmare for if you're an undersized corner, if you're a bigger corner, like, just good luck. He can beat you in so many ways. I think he's the most complete. Like, he is the new version of what Harold Carmichael, I imagine, would be like if he was able to play in the modern day NFL. A.J. Brown. So he's number 4. And then to me, Saquon Barkley's number 5. I almost put Shady McCoy here, but Saquon, because of the home run hitting, kind of like Deshaun Jackson, you just never know when he's going to hit the hole, and he's gone. 60-yard touchdown, just like that. We saw it this week. The first drive against the Giants, you just never know. Home run hitting puts fear into the hearts of defensive players and defensive coordinators. All right, guys, enjoy the holiday. Happy Halloween. Thanks so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. We'll be back next Monday, getting you ready for Packers Week, getting you ready for the trade deadline. Subscribe on all podcast platforms and on YouTube as well. As always, thanks so much for downloading, watching, and listening, and let's go Birds. Fly, Eagles, fly.